You know, you are who you are by birth, not by what you do. And I found that out the hard way growing up. I grew up on a horse farm and we had one neighbor, the Rectors. And I wanted to be like those Rector boys. I mean, I combed my hair like the Rectors. I dressed like the Rectors. I did whatever the Rector family did. And yet, every time a family reunion rolled around or some kind of party that was for family only, I didn't get an invitation. Well, why not? Because no matter what I did and no matter how much I was like a Rector on the outside, I didn't have the bloodline, the lineage, the heritage. I wasn't really a Rector. You know, you could pull out my birth certificate at any point during that time and it would always say one thing, Farley. I'm a Farley by birth. I'm a Farley by nature. The blood flowing through my veins is Farley, and it'll always be that way. And God is trying to say the same thing spiritually. You know, we can grow numb to the term born again, born again, born again. It's used, it's even abused these days, and yet there's so much truth in it that we are who we are by birth, not by behavior. And so sinners aren't people who go about sinning to become sinners. We're born sinners. And saints aren't people who go about doing good things to become saints. We're born saints when we're reborn in Jesus Christ. We are who we are by birth, not by what we do. You know, there's no image in my mind that has a greater impact than the image of the Matryoshka doll. Now, a Matryoshka doll, if you don't know about these dolls, this image really teaches me what it means to be in Christ. The Matryoshka doll is a Russian doll and it's made of wood, and you pull off the top of one doll and you look inside and there's a smaller doll, and then you detach the head of that doll and you look inside and there's even a smaller doll, and this goes on and on and on until you find the last doll at the very core. And so if you were to take those dolls and throw that doll into a fire, well, what happens? What happens to the dolls that are on the inside? Well, they burn too. And what if you were to take that doll and raise it up on a shelf and just set it on a shelf in a shop? Well, those other dolls would be raised up too because they're in the larger doll. And that's a very neat picture for me. As I grew up and my mom collected these dolls, I had that imprinted on my mind. And when I began to delve into the Scriptures and see that the fact that I was in Christ was mentioned 6 times more often than Christ being in me, I began to say, maybe this is something I need to consider. Maybe it's something I need to grasp more deeply. And so what does it mean to be in Christ? It means that we were in Christ when He was burned on the cross. And we were in Christ when He was buried. And we were in Christ when He was raised and seated at God's right hand. And that's what Romans 6 is telling us, that we were crucified with Christ. And that's what Ephesians 2 is telling us when it says He raised us up and seated us with Him in heavenly places. Being a Christian is not about what we do. It's not about what we're doing. It's about who we're in and which life we're drawing from as we live life. You know, it's interesting because we've got a choice, don't we? I mean, we don't have to live from Christ in every moment. In fact, you can probably cite a number of times where you've done the opposite. You've done what the Bible calls live according to the flesh. Well, what is the flesh? I mean, if we're so new, if we're so different, I mean, you say we've been crucified with Christ and that we're raised and seated and we're new, well then why do we still deal with these dirty things, these thoughts, these actions that we wish we could change? Well, the Bible explains that as the flesh. And you know, growing up, I always thought the flesh was just a representation of really, really bad looking things, you know, like idolatry and drunkenness and carousing. And sure, those things are on the list. Those are deeds of the flesh. But what I also discovered is there's a flip side. I mean, Galatians talks about perfecting ourselves according to the flesh. Have you ever thought that the flesh might be religious in your life? Have you ever thought that the flesh might be like a self-improvement program in your life? I mean, did you ever think that there was a flip side to the flesh? And it doesn't really matter whether the flesh is good looking or bad looking. If it's not Jesus, it's not Jesus. It's either flesh or spirit. There's no middle ground. You know, we Christians, we do a lot of sinning, and we even have thoughts that we're embarrassed of, and we wonder, where are these thoughts coming from? And is it just the flesh, or is there something that's eating at me? Is there something that's getting to me that I could learn more about and maybe conquer, at least fight in a different way? And you know, it kind of reminds me when I get attacked with thoughts that I wish I didn't think, and I think, well, you know, I'm so earnest, I'm such a sincere Christian, why am I thinking this stuff? Imagine this. Imagine you were to go on a vacation to a tropical destination, and you get there and you're in your hotel room and you decide you want to go down to the beach, so you throw on your bathing suit and you bolt down the path toward the beach. And as you're on your way down to the beach, you get a parasite up in your foot, and you never had this happen before. You don't even know it's there, but you get this pain in your foot, and you can't explain it. And so then the pain starts surging, pain messages flying to your brain, and you just can't figure out what is the source of this pain, so you consult with a doctor, and then another doctor, and another doctor, and finally you just come to the conclusion that you're the problem, that your foot's the problem, and that you've got to amputate. I mean, there's no other answer. Well, what a tragedy. I mean, what a sad conclusion to come to, because if you could only discover what was in you that was the problem, then that would alleviate the whole problem. But it's not you. It's not you that's the problem, it's what's in you. And in the same way, Paul says some radical things about our struggle with sin. I mean, Romans chapter 7, verse 17 and 20, they both say the same thing. They both say, when I do the very thing I don't want to do, when I'm doing what I don't want, it's no longer I. It's no longer I, but it's sin living in me that does it. There's something in you that's not you. There's a parasite called sin. And yet it hooks us. It hooks us in ways that have succeeded in the past. It hooks us through the flesh. And so it's the power of sin in the flesh and the power of sin in the flesh, and they war against us. But here's the good news. You are not them. You are not the flesh. And you are not the power of sin. Those things explain why you still sin. Those things explain why we still struggle. But you, who are you? We as Christians, we're new creatures in Christ. We're different. We're different at the core because we were in Christ when He died. We were in Christ when He was buried, and we're in Christ as He was raised and seated, and so we're different. We're different from the guy next door. We're different at the core. So when we sin, we're actually doing something we don't want to do. Paul said it himself. But the good news, the source of that thought, it's not you. It's no longer you, but it's sin in you. Talk about a dramatic revelation. Does it make a difference? It's just information, but with information comes choice. And with a new way to choose, with an understanding, with the enemy's cards now being tipped and exposed, the strategy is out in the open. And I can see that living the Christian life is really just waking up every day and being myself.